am Suveda, bearing the roll number 21VQ1A05I1, and today my topic is conversion of flip-flops. The main purpose of the flip-flop conversion is to convert a flip-flop into desired type B flip-flop using some conversion logic. The flip-flop conversions are classified into different types, that are SR flip-flop conversion, JK flip-flop to SR flip-flop conversion, SR flip-flop to D flip-flop conversion, D flip-flop to SR flip-flop conversion, JK flip-flop to T flip-flop conversion, JK to D flip-flop conversion, D flip-flop to JK flip-flop conversion. SR flip-flop to JK flip-flop conversion. In JK flip-flop, J and K are given as external inputs to S and R in SR flip-flop. Here, both S and R are outputs of the combination. The truth table of the flip-flop conversions are shown below. The current state is denoted with QP and QP plus 1 is the next state to be found when the JK inputs are We can build a characteristic table of JK flip-flop and SR flip-flop by using the truth table of JK flip-flop and excitation table of SR flip-flop. After creating a characteristic table, by observing the characteristic table, we can draw a K-map for both J and K and derive an expression for S and R. Here the value of S is equal to QP and value of R is equal to KQP. Following the Boolean expressions of S and R, we can draw a logic diagram. There are 8 possible combinations for 2 inputs J and K. For every combination of J and K and QP, the equivalent QP plus 1 states are found. QP plus 1 simply recommends the future values to K flip-flop after the importance of QP. Then the table is finished by writing the values of S and R compulsory to get each QP plus 1 from the equivalent QP, that is the S and R values to change the state of flip-flop from QP to QP plus 1 are written. JK flip-flop to SR flip-flop conversion. The conversion of the JK flip-flop to SR flip-flop is opposite of the SR flip-flop to JK flip-flop. Here S and R will be the external inputs to JK in the below logic diagram. J and K will be the outputs of the combinational circuit, so the J and K values have to be acquired in terms of S and R and QP. The logic diagram is shown below. The conversion flip-flop to be written in terms of S, R, QP, QP plus 1 and J and K. There are 8 possible combinations for 2 inputs S and R. Here we create a characteristic table using the truth table of SR flip-flop and excitation table of JK flip-flop. By observing the characteristic table, we draw 2 K-maps for representations of J and K. So here the values of J is equal to S and K is equal to R. By following these Boolean expressions, we can now draw a logic diagram for JK flip-flop to SR flip-flop conversion. For every combination, the equivalent QP plus 1 outputs are found. The outputs for the combinations of S is equal to R is equal to 1 are not acceptable for an SR flip-flop. Therefore, outputs are valid and the JK values are taken as don't care. SR flip-flop to D flip-flop conversion. As shown in the below figure, actual inputs of the flip-flop are S and R, where D is the external input. The 4 combinations of S and R, D and QP, conversion table, logic diagram and K-map are given below. Here also the same procedure is followed. For D we follow the truth table and for S we follow the excitation table and we draw the K-map using the characteristic table and then we find out the Boolean expressions for R, S and we draw a logic diagram. D flip-flop to SR flip-flop conversion. In this type of conversion, D is the actual input of the flip-flop where S and R are the external inputs. There are 8 possible combinations and from the external inputs S, R and QP. Nevertheless, since the combination of S is equal to R is equal to 1 is unacceptable, the values of D and QP plus 1 are taken as don't care. The logic diagram D flip-flop to SR flip-flop is showing the conversion from D flip-flop to SR flip-flop, and the K-map for D in terms of S and R and QP are given below. Here also we follow the same procedure. We take the truth table of SR flip-flop and the excitation table of D flip-flop, and we write the characteristic table. Using the characteristic table, we draw a obtain the Boolean expression for D, and we then draw a logic diagram. JK flip-flop to T flip-flop conversion. In this type of conversion, J and K are the actual inputs of the flip-flop, where K is considered as the external input. 4 combinations are created by T, QP, J and K in terms of T and QP. The K-map, the logic diagram and conversion table are given below. Also we follow the same procedure. We draw the truth table of T and the excitation of J and K, and follow the characteristic table, and we obtain the Boolean expressions for both J and K using the K-map. We draw a logic diagram to it. Here the value of J is equal to T and value of K is equal to T. JK flip-flop to D flip-flop conversion. In this type of flip-flop conversion, J and K are the actual inputs, where D is then external input of the flip-flop. The 4 combinations of the flip-flop will be done by using D and Q. In the terms of these, 2 J and K are expressed. The conversion table with 4 combinations, JK flip-flop to D flip-flop conversion logic diagram and K-map for J and K are shown below. As usual, we construct a characteristic table using truth table of D and the excitation of J and K flip-flop, and for this the value of J is equal to D, K is equal to complement of D. We get this Boolean expression by solving the K-map, and now we draw a logic diagram to it. D flip-flop to JK flip-flop conversion. In this type of flip-flop conversion, J and K are the external inputs of the flip-flop, where D is the actual input. The 8 combinations can make by using J, K and QP. The table D is stated in terms of J, K and QP. The K-map D in terms of J, K and QP conversion table, and the logic diagram of the D flip-flop to J is shown below. Also we can follow the same procedure by using the truth table of JK flip-flop and excitation table of D flip-flop. We can construct a characteristic table, and by observing the characteristic table, we can draw a K-map and find out the Boolean of D, which is equal to J complement of QP plus complement of K and QP. And by following the Boolean expression of D, we can now draw the logic diagram for it, which says a conversion of D flip-flop to JK flip-flop and D flip-flop to JK flip-flop. We hope that you have got better understanding of this concept. A conversion of D flip-flop to JK flip-flop. J complement of QP plus complement of K and table. We can draw a K-map and find out the flip-flop is shown below. J, K and QP conversion table and the logic diagram by using J, K and QP that is shown in the, and now we draw a logic diagram to it. The value of J is equal to D and D are shown below. Logic diagram and K-map for J and K in terminations of the flip-flop will be done by using D and Q diagram to it. Here the value of J is equal to T and value of K is equal to T. Expressions for both J and K using the K-map, the logic diagram and conversion table are given. Combinations are created by T, QP, J, and we then draw a logic diagram. Table. Using the characteristic table, we draw a K-map. R and QP are given below. This one are taken as don't care. The logic diagram are 8 possible combinations and R up and R, and we draw a logic diagram. Then we find out the Boolean expressions for S and K-map are given below. The 4 combinations of S and R enter as invalid, and the JK values are taken as don't care. For an SR flip-flop, therefore outputs are JK flip-flop to SR flip-flop conversion. We can now draw a logic diagram for table, we draw 2 K-maps for obtaining There are 8 possible combinations for 2 inputs S and R in QP. The logic diagram is shown below. The S and R will be the external inputs to JK. The flip-flop from QP to QP plus 1 are the equivalent QP, that is the S and R plus 1 simply recommends the future values to be R. We can draw a logic diagram. Value of R is equal to KQP. S and R. Here the value of S is in the excitation table of SR flip-flop. State to be found when the JK inputs are given as external inputs to S and R in SR D flip-flop to JK flip-flop conversion. K flip-flop to T flip-flop conversion, JK flip-flop using some conversion logic. The flip-flop conversion, my topic is conversion of flip-flops.